You see that bridge? I built it with my own hands, every nail, every plank. It connects my land to the main road. Then the HOA decided they could use it too, without asking. One day, I warned them, one more truck, and something's gonna break. They thought I was bluffing. They were dead wrong. Stick around and hit subscribe. You won't believe how this HOA learned their lesson. It all began with a bridge, my bridge. I built it with my own two hands during one long summer 5 years ago. It wasn't much to look at, just timber, bolts, and sweat, but to me it was a symbol of everything I loved about living out here on the edge of the valley. My property stretched across a little creek that split my land in two. The only way to cross it was that bridge. I spent months designing it, checking load limits, and even having an engineer buddy of mine look over the plans. It could handle my truck, my tractor, and the occasional delivery van. But it was never meant for heavy machinery, and certainly not for cement trucks. When I first bought the land, it was quiet. No neighbors for half a mile, just open fields, birdsong, and the hum of the creek. But that changed when the HOA from the new development down the hill decided to expand, right up to my property line. That's when I met Karen. She wasn't hard to spot. Every neighborhood's got one, that person who acts like the whole world is their business. She drove a spotless white SUV, always had a clipboard in her passenger seat, and wore sunglasses big enough to cover half her face. From the day construction started, she treated me like some stubborn obstacle in her grand plan. The first time she came by, she called out, "You know, it'd be nice if you paved that bridge. It's quite rustic." "Rustic's the point," I told her. "It's private property." She smiled, that tight, fake kind of smile people wear when they're about to say something rude but want to sound polite. Well, we'll see how that goes once the community expands. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But a few weeks later, I noticed tire tracks. Not mine. They were deep, wide grooves pressed into the dirt leading straight to my bridge. I walked over, half expecting to see a delivery truck, but what I found made my blood boil. A cement truck had crossed it. There were splinters along the wooden beams, scuffs from the wheels, and cracks beginning to show where the stress had been too much. I stormed down to the development site that afternoon. There were men in hard hats pouring concrete, and guess who was standing there, clipboard in hand, sipping a latte? Karen. I yelled over the noise of the mixer, "Did you send a truck across my bridge?" She looked up like I'd just interrupted a royal decree. "Oh, that?" "Yes. The driver said it was the fastest route to the new cul-de-sac. Don't worry. It's just temporary." "Temporary?" I said, barely keeping calm. "That bridge isn't rated for that kind of weight. You're going to destroy it." Karen shrugged. "Then maybe you should have built something stronger. Progress doesn't wait for anyone." I walked off before I said something I'd regret, but inside, I was fuming. That bridge wasn't just wood and nails, it was mine. Built by hand, over months of sweat and effort. The next morning, I put up a sign at both ends, "Private property, no entry." I even installed a small motion camera hidden in a tree just to be sure. For a while, things were quiet. Then one afternoon, I heard the unmistakable rumble of a diesel engine. I ran outside just in time to see another cement truck crawling across my bridge. My heart dropped, the wood creaked under the weight, dust fell from the beams, and the driver just waved like it was nothing. I sprinted down shouting, "Get that thing off my bridge now." The driver shrugged. Lady from the HOA said it was fine. That was it. The next day, I went to the HOA office. Karen was there, acting like she ran the town. "Mr. Lawson," she said with that fake smile again, "to what do we owe the pleasure?" "You owe me a new bridge," I snapped. She crossed her arms. "Oh, come on. You can't own a bridge over a shared waterway. It's on my deed," I said, slapping a copy of my property map on the counter. "And the waterway isn't shared. You people built next to it, not over it." She gave me that patronizing laugh. "We'll see about that. Our legal team might disagree." That was the moment I realized something. I wasn't just dealing with a nosy neighbor, I was dealing with someone who thought rules didn't apply to her. So, I decided to stop playing nice. If she wanted to treat my bridge like a public road, fine. But next time they tried to cross it, they were going to get a surprise they'd never forget. I called up my old engineer buddy again. Together we started designing something, Not to hurt anyone, of course, but to make sure the next time they tried to drive a cement truck across my bridge, it would make them wish they hadn't. And that's how my little trap began. If you think revenge is all about theatrics and drama, you're only half right. The other half is paperwork, patience, and a little engineering, the kind you don't see in the movies but that wins in real life. After I left the HOA office that day, I didn't storm off to trash their plans or chain the bridge closed. I went home, poured another coffee, and made a list. The list started simple: protect the bridge. Prove who's responsible when it's damaged. Make it impossible, legally and practically, for heavy equipment to cross without explicit recorded authorization. I called my friend Marco, the structural engineer, and asked him to come by. Marco and I go back a long way. He'd laughed when I told him I'd built the bridge myself and then turned serious when I showed him the fresh splinters and tire ruts. He spent half an hour crawling under the beams, checking fasteners, and shaking his head. "Your bridge has heart," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But it wasn't built for sustained heavy loads. We can bolster it, but if cement trucks keep stomping over it, even the best retrofits will only buy time." "Then we don't retrofit it to stop them," I said. "We build a system that prevents them from getting on it in the first place, and records the hell out of anyone who tries." Marco grinned. "Now that I can do." Over the next week, the blueprint grew. It wasn't about theatrics, it was about three things that, when combined, would be irresistible to any bureaucratic, clipboard-wielding HOA: engineering, evidence, and jurisdiction. Engineering. Marco and I designed a short approach that would physically prevent anything over a specified axle weight from getting onto the bridge. Not by sabotage, by regulation and technology. We'd install a pair of retractable steel bollards, spaced to allow cars and small trucks but not concrete mixers. The bollards would be recessed flush with the road when down, and when raised would form an obvious and legal barrier. The trick: the bollards would be controlled by an authorized key system, RFID tags for neighbors, county vehicles, and my own key fob, and a weigh-in-motion sensor placed before the approach that would automatically lock the bollards up if an over-limit vehicle tried to proceed. Surveillance and evidence. While Marco handled the steel and the sensors, I focused on cameras. Not the little consumer cameras Karen liked to wave around. Industrial-grade, time-stamped, license plate reading cameras, one pointing at each entry lane and another mounted under the bridge to catch undercarriage damage. Everything would be synced to a secure cloud server and mirrored to an external drive I'd keep in my safe. If a heavy vehicle illegally crossed, I'd have incontrovertible footage: time, date, license plate, driver face, and the exact strain on the bridge. Legal. This was the boring part, but the part nobody wants to fight. I spent an afternoon at the county office, politely explaining my situation to a patient clerk. With Marco's engineering notes and my property deed, I applied for a temporary maintenance/weight restriction permit for the crossing area. This allowed me to post legally binding signage: weight limit enforced, and no vehicles over X tons. It also gave the county the authority to cite and fine any vehicle violating that order. In short, when the cement trucks crossed the posted permitted limit, it wouldn't be a private squabble, it would be a county violation. I also consulted an attorney friend, Rachel, who specialized in property law. I wanted her eyes on everything: the language of the permit, the exact wording of the signage, and how my surveillance would be documented so it'd be admissible. Rachel smiled at my setup and said, "You aren't setting a trap, Mark. You're making rules and giving the county the paperwork it needs to do its job. If they violate your posted order, it's on them." That phrasing, making rules and giving the county the paperwork it needs, stuck with me. It was the essence of the plan: no tricks, no entrapment, just a legal technological barrier that would either stop them or document their stupidity. Materials and logistics. Marco pulled together a parts list: 2 hydraulic bollards rated for repeated cycles, a weigh-in-motion pad, 3 license plate cameras with IR, a weatherproof control cabinet, and a backup battery system. We ordered everything and scheduled installation for a Wednesday morning when I knew Karen's crews normally worked. The day before installation, I put up obvious temporary warning signs, big professional placards that read, "Temporary weight limit in effect, authorized vehicles only," and a printed notice taped to the HOA construction office door stating the county permit number and effective dates. I also quietly told my deputy friend Tom, who works in county code enforcement, what I was doing and when. I wasn't asking for special favors. I was just making sure the county would respond if their signage and permit were violated. Tom promised to swing by and keep an eye out. Installation day felt like preparing for a hunt you knew you shouldn't enjoy but secretly did. Marco's crew arrived at dawn. The bollards went in precisely, flush with the asphalt. The way pad settled into the road a few meters before the approach, connected to the control cabinet. The cameras were mounted higher than I wanted, almost theatrical, but perfect for capturing license plates and faces. We tested the system. A pickup with my RFID tag approached. The bollards stayed down. A heavy-built van without authorization rolled up slowly. The way pad read the load. The bollards raised automatically, and a loud voice prompt announced, "Weight limit exceeded. Authorization required." The van backed up, grumbling. The system recorded the plate. Success. By midday the system was live, the signs were up, and the bridge looked, to anyone driving by, like a protected crossing. I sat on my porch that evening with Lisa and a beer while the sun dropped behind the fields. There was a peculiar calm in knowing the next move wouldn't be mine. It would be a choice Karen and her contractors made. On Tuesday morning, as if on cue, the cement trucks returned. They rolled up to the approach, heavy and loud, drivers with earbuds and schedules to keep. The lead truck didn't even slow for the way pad. It barreled forward and the bollards shot up, hydraulic steel rising in a clean, authoritative click. The truck driver cursed, threw it into reverse, and fumbled for another route. Camera shutters clicked. The way pad recorded the over-limit status and snapped a perfect plate photo. A notification pinged to my phone, violation, 1:10:03 a.m., truck license, R5TX21. Across the street, Karen stood with her clipboard, face flushing with something like rage and confusion. Her planner guys fumed. My phone buzzed. Tom from Code Enforcement texting a single thumbs-up emoji. It was small, petty, some would say, but it worked exactly as planned. The system didn't entrap, it enforced. It didn't humiliate, it documented. And it turned a private nuisance into a public violation. I sat back in my chair, tasted the beer, and felt something else, that quiet satisfaction where you know you did everything the right way. The bridge stayed intact. The trucks learned to detour. And Karen, for the first time, had to argue with a camera and the county, not with a man she assumed she could browbeat into silence. That night, I checked the footage again before bed. There they were, cement trucks trying their luck, then turning away in frustration, and one slow-motion shot of Karen waving her clipboard like a banner that said, "I can still make trouble." The next morning, the county had issued a ticket for the first attempt. The HOA's contractor called me, red-faced and defensive, asking what I wanted done. I told them the same thing I'd said to Karen months before, don't cross the bridge. But the best part? I didn't have to tell them why. The cameras, the permit, and the raised bollards did the talking. And the trap I'd built wasn't cruel or dangerous. It was just smart, patient, and unstoppable. Next up, baiting their pride, because Karen loves shortcuts, and pride is the easiest thing in the world to exploit. If you want people to walk into a trap, you don't shout the plan from the rooftop. You give them exactly what they think they want: speed, convenience, and the illusion of control. And for Karen, the clipboard queen of every petty edict in town, the thing she craved most was being first. First to finish a job, first to have the nicest pavement, first to make everyone else comply. After the bollards and cameras were in place, the bridge wasn't just protected, it was provocation waiting to happen. I knew Karen's crews were under schedule pressure, developers have budgets, and cement trucks cost money when they idle. I also knew Karen loved to claim the moral high ground. So I created a situation that combined both, an urgent sidewalk pour, a perfectly plausible deadline, and a dangling shortcut that would be too tempting for a manager trying to hit numbers. First, a little theater. I called a couple of contractors who'd done small jobs for me in the past, harmless guys who owed me beers and were great at playing parts. I asked them to appear to be scouting routes and to casually mention the fastest route past my bridge. Just enough chatter so Karen's crews could overhear. I didn't lie, the route was faster by a few minutes, but it came with a cost, my bridge, that the contractor actors conveniently didn't mention to the men with the mixers. Next, the bait. I posted a polite public notice on the HOA contractor board that a neighboring parcel would be hosting an emergency pour to fix a retaining wall washed out after the spring storms. The notice used neutral language and included a plausible deadline, 2 days, plus a note that all best effort access routes had been approved by a local project manager. I intentionally framed it as a community project everyone should rally around. After all, goodwill is the easiest bait of all. Because Karen loves being the organizer, it only made sense she'd push to be in front of it. Then I let the rumor seed do its work. I chatted at the local hardware store, made small talk with delivery drivers, and left a couple of printed maps, showing the short route across my bridge, propped where the HOA crew stopped for coffee. These were all small nudges, nothing overt. It's funny how quickly people take a shortcut when someone else has baked the cake for them. Within 24 hours, the trap had everything it needed: an impending deadline, pressure on the contractor, and most importantly, an excited Karen. She took the bait the way a sun-starved plant reaches for a light bulb. She posted a follow-up in the HOA group: urgent, contractor scheduled for emergency pour. If anyone has access issues, contact me. Her tone was triumphant. She was publicly steering the operation. That's the moment I'd been waiting for. I didn't interfere. I watched. I let her feel powerful. The human ego is deliciously predictable. Give someone authority and a deadline, and they will try to make the world conform to them, even if the world doesn't want to cooperate. If you want to stop someone's arrogance, give them a chance to act on it. They'll usually choose speed over care. On the morning the pour was scheduled, the contractor team arrived with their trucks and a harried foreman. I was on my porch with a thermos, pretending to be annoyed but keeping notes on my phone. The foreman made the polite rounds, asked about access, and because I'd seeded the idea, suggested the short route. The driver didn't even hesitate. He'd been told time was money and that Karen had approved access routes. Human nature took over. They were in a hurry. Their first truck hit the way pad. The display chirped, overweight. The bollards raised like the teeth of some polite gate, and the driver slammed brakes so hard gravel dust flew. For a split second he looked stunned, then annoyed. He tried to edge forward, angling the trailer like men do when they think physics will bend to their will. The bollards rose higher. The voice prompt blasted, weight limit exceeded. Authorization required. You should have seen Karen then. At first she barked orders: let it through. Let it through. The foreman shook his head. He knew the risks. A heavy truck on that bridge could cost his license and their schedule. The second truck, tugging a mixer, moved up to the pad. The system pinged again, the bollards rose, and the truck had no option but to back up. That's when arrogance curdles into panic. But of course, arrogance has a stubborn cousin: insistence. Karen clapped her hands and marched up to the control cabinet like she owned the software. Open it, she demanded. This is an emergency. I authorize access. She twisted the dial, waved her clipboard at anyone who would listen, and tried to produce authority from sheer will. It was beautiful in its futility. At that point, the cameras did their job. Crisp license plates, clear driver faces, Karen's voice cornering the foreman into a decision to cross despite the warnings. The foreman, under pressure to meet Karen's timeline and wanting to avoid a public scene, tried again. The second truck edged forward, the way pad lit red, the bollards rose again, and this time the driver's tire clipped the edge of the first bollard. Metal screamed on metal, the truck shuddered, and a long, ugly squeal from stressed axles echoed in the valley. I kept a steady face on my porch as the system logged everything: time, plate, driver ID, and Corner Construction's foreman giving an audible, "We were told to proceed." The foreman's text message history, which the county later used in enforcement, showed messages from Karen insisting they get the pour done that morning. It was perfect evidence, the kind lawyers frame on mantles. The county inspector arrived within an hour. He checked the bollard logs, the waypad data, and the camera feeds. He wrote a citation on the spot for the contractor, and the county sent a notice directly to the HOA: unauthorized use of a private crossing and potential structural damage to a privately maintained bridge. Karen's optimistic smile withered into a complicated expression of anger, shame, and the vague recognition that the hill she was standing on was now full of evidence. As the contractor's trucks idled, now facing fines and potential repair bills, Karen's chest heaved. She tried to play it cool, insisted this was all a misunderstanding, but the facts had weight heavier than any lobbyist's spreadsheet. Her authority had allowed a violation to occur, and now there was a paper trail as long as the bridge. By the end of the day, when the county finally took the crew's statements and the contractor's supervisor called their office to explain the fines, Karen slunk back into her SUV with her clipboard like a child whose coloring sheet was taken away. She'd acted like she could bend a private crossing to her will, and the crossing had bitten back with cameras, permits. She'd acted like she could bend a private crossing to her will, and the crossing had bitten back with cameras, permits, and physics. I poured myself a beer that night and sat on the porch while the sunset turned the valley honeygold. The trap hadn't been violent or mean. It had been patient, lawful, and incontrovertible. Pride had led them over the line, and evidence followed, exactly the combination I wanted. Next up, the fallout. The county's notice would force the HOA to respond, and Karen would have to explain herself to people whose homes she'd been judging for years. That conversation was going to be fun. The county inspector didn't waste time. By noon the next day, a white Ford F-250 with the county infrastructure seal rolled up to my gate. Out stepped Mr. Delgado, the same inspector who'd signed off on my bridge 2 years ago when I rebuilt it after a flood. A quiet man, rarely smiled, but sharp as a scalpel when it came to property lines and permits. He walked up, clipboard in hand, and said, "Morning, Sheriff. Heard there was some unauthorized heavy traffic over your bridge yesterday?" I gestured toward the cameras mounted above the path. "You heard right. They came through twice. One almost bent a bollard. All HOA-connected trucks." Delgado nodded slowly, flipping a few papers. "We got a report. HOA says it was an emergency community repair." He looked at me over his glasses. "Funny thing though, you're not in their HOA." I grinned. "That's what I told them the day I moved in." Delgado chuckled. "Well, looks like that little misunderstanding just got expensive for them." He spent the next hour examining everything. He weighed the bollard's alignment, checked the sensor logs, and watched the footage with a faint, knowing smirk. The video clearly showed Karen waving her clipboard like a wand while shouting orders at the cement truck driver, even as the red warning lights blinked access denied in her face. The audio captured every word. "Go ahead, it's fine. I'll handle it." That one sentence was all Delgado needed. When he finished, he clicked his pen and said, "This isn't just trespassing, Sheriff. It's an unauthorized commercial crossing of private infrastructure. The county takes that seriously, especially when it involves potential bridge damage." He looked toward the HOA side of the property line, where a few residents were already gathering, whispering as they peeked from behind mailboxes. You could feel the tension building like a thunderstorm. "I'll be filing a report today," Delgado said, sliding his notepad into his vest pocket. "You'll get a copy for your records. I suspect the HOA will be hearing from both us and their insurance company real soon." As he left, I noticed a familiar SUV turning the corner, Karen's silver Lexus. Of course, she couldn't resist making an entrance. She rolled down her window halfway and said with a forced smile, "Good morning, Sheriff. I was just stopping by to clarify this misunderstanding." I folded my arms. "Misunderstanding? You ordered 2 cement trucks across private property." Karen's tone was sugary sweet, the kind that could rot your teeth. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We were helping the community. It's all connected land, isn't it? We just didn't realize you were so sensitive about private ownership." I cut in. "Karen, that bridge cost me $60,000 out of pocket, and the HOA doesn't pay a cent toward it. You've got no jurisdiction past that line." I pointed to the bright yellow marker stake clearly visible near the base of the bridge. "You cross it without permission, that's trespassing." She tightened her lips. "I'll have our lawyer contact you." "You might want to start with your insurance first," I said evenly. "County's about to file a structural violation against your HOA. That's going to sting." Her face twitched, that involuntary flicker of fear people get when their bluff gets called. She quickly regained her composure and said, "Well, we'll see about that," before speeding off, nearly clipping Delgado's truck mirror on her way out. By sunset, the emails began. The HOA board, usually as silent as a tomb, sent out a community update titled Bridge Access Incident. It was the most carefully worded nonsense I'd ever read. According to their version, certain members of the community mistakenly utilized a neighboring access route during a time-sensitive project. Mistakenly. Right. That's what they called trespassing now. But the real show started in the comments section of the HOA forum. Homeowners weren't buying it. One posted, "Karen, didn't you say you personally approved the trucks?" Another wrote, "Why are HOA funds being used on projects not even inside our boundary?" Within hours, the post had over 60 comments, and not one of them in Karen's favor. The next day, the county's official letter arrived, certified mail, full of bold lettering and legal citations. Notice of violation. Unauthorized commercial crossing of private bridge infrastructure. It demanded that the HOA cover inspection fees, potential structural assessment costs, and a civil penalty for each vehicle that crossed without authorization. The total? Roughly $14,000. That's when the panic started spreading through the community like wildfire. Residents started calling emergency board meetings. Some of them even came to my house, hats in hand, apologizing for the misunderstanding. They weren't bad people, they were just tired of Karen's power trips. For the first time, they realized her arrogance wasn't harmless, it was expensive. One man, a retired engineer named Tom, shook my hand and said, "We've been wanting to vote her out for years, but she always bullies everyone into silence. This time, though, you've given us the proof we needed." I didn't smile, but inside, I'll admit, it felt good. Meanwhile, Karen's social media went dark. No new posts. No neighborhood emails. She'd gone underground, probably scrambling with the board's lawyer to do damage control. But there was no easy fix this time. The bridge had camera footage, county data, and a fine with her name on it. It was ironclad. 2 days later, the HOA president, a mild-mannered man named Greg who always seemed half asleep, knocked on my door. He had that "I'm just the messenger" look. "Sheriff," he began nervously, "the board wanted me to apologize on behalf of the HOA. Karen overstepped. We're working on a resolution." I kept my voice level. "A resolution would be nice, Greg. But understand, I'm not letting this go quietly. I expect full compensation for the damage risk, plus coverage of the inspection costs." Greg nodded quickly. "Of course. We'll handle it. Karen's on probation, you could say." Probation. The word made me grin. By the time he left, I knew things had shifted. The HOA wasn't the untouchable little empire Karen thought it was. The county was watching, the homeowners were angry, and the board was scrambling. And me? I was just getting started. Because when someone tries to use rules to trample your rights, sometimes the best revenge is to make them live by their own paperwork. By the end of that week, the HOA had gone from silent panic to full-blown damage control. Karen might have been keeping her head down, but someone on the board clearly thought they could flip the narrative, maybe even intimidate me into backing off. That's when the letter came. It arrived on Friday morning. Thick envelope. Fancy embossed letterhead. The kind of thing designed to look important before you even open it. It read, "Dear Mr. Carter, the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association hereby demands that you cease and desist any interference with HOA construction projects and access routes. Your recent installation of obstructive equipment, i.e., bollards, cameras, and sensors, may be in violation of local right-of-way ordinances. Failure to comply within 7 business days may result in legal action." Signed Harrison and Burke, attorneys for the Willow Ridge HOA. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. The audacity was stunning. They were threatening me for protecting my own property that wasn't even theirs. I called my attorney, Rachel McKenna, a sharp woman with a dry wit and a memory like a steel trap. She'd worked with me back when I rebuilt the bridge after the flood. When I explained the situation, she chuckled and said, "Oh, I've been waiting for something like this. Send me the letter, Sheriff. Let's play." Within 2 days, we had a reply drafted and ready to send. Rachel insisted on handling it, with maximum legal weight and minimum politeness. It was beautiful. "Dear Counsel, your client, the Willow Ridge HOA, has repeatedly trespassed on private property owned solely by my client, Sheriff Nathan Carter. Said property lies outside HOA jurisdiction, as verified by both county land records and recorded survey documents. Any further attempt to claim, cross, or utilize said bridge without written permission will result in criminal trespass charges and civil damages. Furthermore, we are prepared to file a counterclaim for harassment, defamation, and intentional interference with private infrastructure, should your client pursue this frivolous action." I had Rachel include a full packet of supporting evidence, time-stamped footage, sensor data, land registry documents, even the county's violation notice against the HOA. She sent it via certified mail, email, and just for dramatic flair, a hand-delivered copy to their lawyer's office. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. Then came the phone call. Karen. Her tone was icy, but forced, like someone trying to sound calm while standing on a collapsing bridge. "Sheriff Carter," she began, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. The HOA doesn't want to fight. We just need cooperation from everyone in the neighborhood. Karen, I cut in, you don't represent everyone. You represent a homeowners group that doesn't even include my land. You tried to fine me, trespassed twice, damaged county-monitored infrastructure, and now you're threatening me legally. Cooperation isn't the word I'd use. She huffed. We're just trying to maintain community standards. Then start by reading your map, I said flatly. Your boundary line ends 30 feet before my bridge. Always has. That was the last time she called me directly. The next morning, a plain white sedan pulled up outside my gate. Out stepped Mr. Burke, the attorney listed on the letter. He was dressed like a man who'd watched too many courtroom dramas, slicked hair, shiny shoes, and an overconfident smirk. He approached me with a folder in hand. Sheriff Carter, he said, mind if we chat? I shrugged. Sure. You're standing on my land, so technically, I could charge you rent for the privilege. He forced a laugh. Cute. Look, I'm here off the record. My client tells me there's been some confusion about easements and right-of-way. Confusion. I raised an eyebrow. I've got the county survey map right here. I handed him a printed copy. The bridge, clearly marked in bold blue lines, was labeled private access, owned by N. Carter. This isn't confusion, counselor. It's geography. He scanned it, then his smile faltered. Well, there may be a pending review of those designations. I crossed my arms. You mean Karen's trying to rewrite land boundaries because she can't admit she's wrong? He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Let's just say the board is exploring options. I grinned. You tell the board that exploring my property again without permission will involve more than options. It'll involve a criminal report. Mr. Burke nodded, muttered something about needing to confer with his client, and left. He looked smaller walking away than when he'd arrived. 2 days later, the real trap closed. Rachel called me laughing so hard I could barely understand her. Nathan, she said between chuckles, you're not going to believe this. The HNA tried to file a restraining order against you for interfering with neighborhood access. Guess who denied it? Let me guess, I said. Judge Harper. Bingo, she said. He tossed it before it even made the docket. His words, and I quote, you can't trespass on your own land. I couldn't help but grin ear to ear. The HMA's attempt to bully me had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly. The judge's written response was public record, meaning anyone in the county could now read that the HMA had been officially reprimanded for overreach. Within hours, screenshots of the court order were circulating through the community group chat. People were furious, not at me, but at Karen and her board for dragging everyone into legal embarrassment. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from Tom, the retired engineer neighbor who'd always been quietly supportive. Tom, they're having an emergency meeting tomorrow. Word is, half the board's turning on Karen. Bring popcorn. I chuckled. Oh, I was going to do more than bring popcorn. I was going to bring the receipts. When the day of the meeting arrived, I made sure to attend, quietly, respectfully, in full uniform. The room went dead silent when I walked in. Karen tried to act unfazed, but her eyes flickered with that same nervous twitch I'd seen when the county inspector caught her lying. Evening, everyone, I said calmly, taking a seat near the back. I'm just here to observe. It didn't take long before the board's own members began confronting her. Greg, the HMA president, held up a copy of the violation notice and asked, Karen, why did you authorize the trucks without proper clearance? Her answer? Stammering excuses. I was told the property was public access. Tom spoke up. By who? Yourself? Laughter rippled through the room. Karen turned beet red. I didn't need to say a word. The evidence had spoken for itself. By the end of that meeting, Karen's leadership was officially under review. She tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, but the room wasn't buying it. The same people she'd once bossed around now looked at her with open disgust. As I walked out, Greg stopped me at the door. Sheriff, thank you. I think this might finally be the beginning of the end for her. I nodded. Not the end yet, Greg. But close. Because Karen had made one more mistake, one she didn't even know about yet. And when it came to light, She'd wish those cement trucks had never crossed my bridge. You can tell when someone's cornered. Their words get fast, their smiles get tight, and they suddenly start showing up to fix things they once denied doing wrong. That's exactly what Karen did the week after the meeting. She went into PR mode, waving at neighbors, sending out cheerful emails titled "Moving Forward as a Community," pretending nothing had happened. The problem was, everyone had already seen the county violation letter and the judge's dismissal of her ridiculous restraining order. The neighborhood gossip mill wasn't kind, and for once, she couldn't control the narrative. But I had a hunch she wasn't done scheming. Karen wasn't the type to walk away, she was the type to double down. And that's when something strange happened. On a Tuesday morning, I noticed 2 brand new cement trucks parked near the HOA's Central Park. Same company name, Corner Construction, but different paint jobs. That struck me as odd. When a company gets fined, they often rebrand or shift their contracts under a sister company to dodge liability. I'd seen it plenty of times in my law enforcement days. So I called my old friend, Detective Mason, who still worked over in the county's fraud division. "Mason," I said, "got a minute for a favor?" "For you, Sheriff?" "Always. What's going on?" "I've got a local HOA rep hiring the same company that just got fined for unauthorized crossings. Only the trucks are repainted, the paperwork smells off, and I'm wondering if this is the same operation hiding behind a shell company." He chuckled. "Sounds shady already. Send me what you got." I sent him photos of the trucks, the names, and the DOT numbers I jotted down. Within a day, he called me back. "You were right," Mason said. "Same owner, same business license. They just changed the logo and filed under a new LLC last month. Probably trying to skirt insurance restrictions after that fine." I smiled. "Thought so." But here's where things really got interesting. Mason also found that the HOA had no public record of the contract for this new company. In other words, Karen had quietly hired them, again, without a board vote, without transparency, and using HOA funds. That was a smoking gun. I decided to dig deeper. The HOA had to post their meeting minutes online per local regulations. So that evening, I went through every PDF on their site, scrolling line by line. Karen's signature appeared on multiple contractor approvals, including one for Corner Solutions, LLC. She'd listed herself as the project coordinator, authorizing a payout of nearly $38,000 for retaining wall repair and park pathway improvement. Except the work hadn't started yet. The trucks were just sitting idle near the park. No crews, no equipment, no sign of actual progress. So where did the money go? I called Rachel, my attorney. "Rachel, I think Karen's been using HOA funds to pay her buddies at Corner Construction, who might just be cutting her a piece of the profit." Rachel whistled. "If you're right, that's not just unethical. That's embezzlement or fraud depending on how she processed it. Got proof?" "Not yet," I said. "But I can get it." The next day, I walked over to the park just as the Corner Solutions foreman was stepping out of his truck. I flashed my badge, not as a threat, just as a reminder. "Morning," I said casually. "You boys starting a project here?" He hesitated. Yeah, eventually. Waiting on permit clearance." "Permit clearance, huh?" I smiled. "Which department?" He stammered, then admitted, "Karen told us she'd handle all that." Bingo. I didn't press further. I just nodded and walked away, leaving him sweating in the morning sun. That evening, I made a quiet visit to the county permit office. The clerk there, Janice, had known me for years. "Janice," I said, "mind checking something? Do you have any active permits for Willow Ridge HOA under a contractor named Corner Solutions?" She typed for a moment, frowned, and said, "Nope. Nothing in our system. Closest thing I see is a pending application, filed last month, under the old name, Corner Construction. But it was flagged for review after that bridge incident." That was it. The entire project Karen was paying for didn't even legally exist. So I did what any sheriff with a low tolerance for corruption would do. I documented everything. Emails, screenshots, permit lookups, photos, contractor statements, all neatly packaged and time-stamped. And then, I dropped it off directly with the county auditor's office. Within 48 hours, things blew up. The auditor's department opened a formal investigation into Willow Ridge HOA's financial activity. Inspectors showed up at the HOA office, a little shed beside the clubhouse, and hauled out boxes of records. Neighbors stood around watching, whispering, filming on their phones. By noon, everyone knew something serious was happening. Karen's car was parked out front, door half open, as she frantically tried to explain herself to an investigator. "I didn't do anything wrong," she shouted. "It was all approved." The board knew. Except the board didn't. When Greg, the HOA president, arrived and saw the auditors carrying out documents, his face went pale. "Karen, what did you sign?" Just maintenance projects," she stammered. Greg's tone hardened. "Without a vote? Without permits? Are you insane?" The crowd around them grew thicker, phones recording, voices murmuring. The once feared HOA queen now stood exposed in the daylight, her authority unraveling in real time. Later that evening, I got a call from Mason again. "You'll like this," he said. The contractor told auditors they've been paying Karen a 10% coordination fee in cash. She called it a consulting arrangement. I couldn't help laughing. Consulting? That's one way to spell kickback. County Ethics Board is taking it seriously, Mason continued. This isn't just HOA politics anymore. She might be facing criminal charges. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension leave my shoulders. The bridge. The threats. The fines. The nonsense letters. It was all leading to this. Karen had finally hung herself with her own paperwork. That weekend, I went for a walk across my bridge. The sunset poured molten gold over the water, reflecting off the rails like fire. For the first time in a long while, it was quiet, peaceful. The HOA was too busy imploding to bother anyone. But as I looked back toward the neighborhood, I could see Karen's house, blinds drawn, no movement. She knew the storm she'd unleashed was finally crashing down. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of justice. If you told me a month ago that Karen, the same woman who once tried to fine me for painting my own mailbox, would end up in handcuffs on her own front lawn, I might have laughed. But the universe has a way of catching up to people like her. And this time, it wasn't the HOA enforcing community rules. It was the law enforcing justice. It all started on a calm Friday morning. The sun was barely cresting over Willow Ridge, and the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and rain. I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I saw two unmarked county vehicles roll slowly down the cul-de-sac. Behind them came a familiar SUV, one I instantly recognized. Detective Mason stepped out first. His badge caught the morning light as he shut the door and adjusted his jacket. He saw me across the street and smirked. "Morning, Sheriff. You might want to stick around for this." I didn't need to ask what this was. Within minutes, Karen's driveway turned into a scene straight out of a procedural show. Two county investigators and a deputy sheriff approached her front door, while neighbors quietly emerged from their houses, curious, whispering, clutching coffee mugs like popcorn. Karen opened the door in her usual power outfit, bright pink blazer, pearl necklace, clipboard under her arm as if she were about to host a meeting. But this time, she wasn't smiling. "Can I help you?" she asked sharply. "Ma'am," said the lead investigator, "we're here regarding a financial investigation involving Willow Ridge HOA. We have a warrant to search your property and seize HOA-related documents and electronic devices." Karen blinked, confused. "Excuse me? That's ridiculous. You can't just..." Mason stepped forward, calm but firm. "Yes, ma'am, we can. This warrant's been signed by a county judge. You've been under investigation for the misuse of HOA funds." You could feel the neighborhood's collective gasp ripple through the air. Karen's face drained of color. "Misuse? What funds?" "I didn't," Mason interrupted smoothly. "Ma'am, please step aside." She hesitated, gripping her clipboard like a shield. "This is harassment. I know my rights. I'm calling the HOA board right now." From behind the investigators, Greg, the HOA president, appeared, looking grim. "You don't need to call, Karen. I'm already here." That froze her in place. Greg folded his arms. "The board had no idea you were writing checks to fake companies. You forged approval signatures. The auditors found your name on every unauthorized payment." Karen's composure cracked. Her voice went shrill. "I was improving the neighborhood. That bridge, that park project, It was all for the community. Mason shook his head. We have documentation showing kickbacks from contractors paid to your personal account. You took over $8,000 in consulting fees from public HOA funds. That's not community improvement. That's embezzlement. By now, more neighbors had gathered on the sidewalks, phones recording, kids peeking from behind parents. The once proud HOA queen was surrounded by the very people she used to intimidate with fines and letters. Karen's eyes darted between them, the judgment in their faces, the murmurs, the whispered "I knew it." "Please," she said finally, her voice trembling, "this is all a mistake." "I can explain," Mason nodded slightly to his deputy. "Ma'am, you'll have plenty of time to explain. For now, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud under County Statute 314. As he recited her rights, Karen's expression shifted from disbelief to panic. Her clipboard dropped to the concrete. Papers fluttered across the driveway like scattered leaves. When the cuffs clicked behind her back, the sound echoed louder than the sirens that had once backed her up during HOA inspections. The same neighbors she'd once scolded for unauthorized porch furniture were now holding up phones, filming her being escorted to the unmarked car. Mrs. Henderson from 2 houses down muttered, "About time," under her breath. And then came the final blow. As the investigators began hauling boxes of documents and Karen's computer out of her house, Greg called out to her, "You're permanently removed from the HOA board. Effective immediately." Karen turned, eyes wide. "You can't do that." Greg's voice was steady. "Yes, we can. The bylaws you wrote yourself say anyone under criminal investigation for misuse of funds is suspended indefinitely." That irony wasn't lost on anyone. The crowd murmured again, half pity, half satisfaction. The self-appointed enforcer of rules had finally broken her own. Mason gave me a nod from across the street as he shut the car door. "We'll be in touch, Sheriff. Thanks for the tip-off." I just nodded, glad to help. When the convoy rolled away, silence hung over the neighborhood. People lingered in little clusters, replaying the scene, trading stories. The same street that used to fear Karen now felt lighter, freer, like a weight had finally been lifted. A few hours later, I walked down to the bridge. The water flowed calmly beneath it, glimmering with the reflection of a bright blue sky. For the first time in months, no cement trucks, no shouting, no harassment. Just peace. Greg joined me there, hands in his pockets. "You know, I didn't believe half the things folks said about her. But seeing it today," he shook his head. "You were right to stand your ground." I smiled faintly. "I just wanted to protect my property. Didn't think it'd lead to all this." "Funny thing," Greg said. "She always acted like she was protecting the neighborhood. Turns out she was just protecting her wallet." We both laughed quietly at that. As the sun began to set, I looked across the bridge, the same one Karen once called an eyesore. Now it stood as a silent monument to standing firm against bullying and corruption. Sometimes, justice doesn't come fast. But when it comes loud. And that day, the sound of those handcuffs snapping shut was the sweetest kind of justice I'd ever heard. The Monday after Karen's arrest felt like waking up from a bad dream. For the first time in years, Willow Ridge was quiet, not the fake, fearful quiet that used to hang in the air when Karen prowled the streets with her clipboard, but a calm, hopeful one. No HOA inspectors. No random violation notices slipped under doors. Just peace. Still, there was cleanup to do, not just the kind that involved paperwork, but the kind that required trust. The HOA board called an emergency community meeting for that evening. It was the first one in over a year that didn't have Karen sitting front and center. The clubhouse lights were warm, and for once, people showed up without dread in their eyes. Greg, the acting president, stood at the front with a manila folder full of papers. He looked tired but determined. "All right, everyone," he began, his voice steady. "We have a lot to discuss. The county has confirmed that former HOA chairwoman Karen Lewis has been formally charged with embezzlement, fraud, and falsifying community records." The crowd stirred. Some gasped. Others muttered under their breath. It was surreal hearing it said aloud. The woman who had fined people for kids' bikes left on the lawn was now being prosecuted for felony theft. Greg continued, flipping a page. "We'll be cooperating fully with the county investigators. Every check, every payment, Every so-called community project will be audited. The HOA is essentially under reconstruction. A woman in the second row, Mrs. Jacobs, raised her hand nervously. So what happens to all the fines she issued? I paid nearly $1,000 last year for a fence she said wasn't approved. Greg nodded. Good question. We've already discussed it with the county attorney. Any fines issued under fraudulent conditions will be reviewed and refunded, if possible. We're also revising the HOA bylaws to require community votes on future enforcement decisions. That got a round of applause. A cautious, uncertain applause, but it was a start. As people shared their experiences, it became clear just how deep Karen's influence ran. She'd been controlling the landscapers, setting inflated maintenance contracts, and even charging late fees on fines people never actually owed. The more Greg revealed, the more neighbors realized she'd been running the HOA like her own private kingdom. I sat in the back, listening. For months, I'd been the outsider, the guy with the bridge she hated. But that night, folks came up to me one by one, shaking my hand, thanking me for standing my ground when no one else dared to. I heard you reported her, one man said. Yeah, I replied quietly, but she gave me plenty of reasons. By the end of the meeting, Greg announced one final thing. We're holding a special election in 2 weeks to elect a new board, one that actually represents the neighborhood. No more fear, no more fake violations, and no more Karen. That got a real cheer this time. The kind that came from people finally exhaling after holding their breath too long. That night, I walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights. The bridge looked peaceful again, its new supports gleaming under the moonlight. For the first time, I didn't see it as a point of conflict. It was a line of peace, the border between what was and what could be. The next few days were surprisingly normal. Kids played in yards again. Neighbors waved when they saw each other. People started repainting, gardening, fixing fences, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. The tension that had gripped Willow Ridge for years was finally melting away. Even the mailman, who used to avoid our street altogether, started smiling when he did his route. You folks finally got rid of that lady, he said one morning. Sure did, I replied. He chuckled. Good. She once tried to fine me for parking too long at a stop sign. I nearly spat out my coffee laughing. 2 weeks later, the HOA election day arrived. The clubhouse buzzed with energy, not the nervous kind, but something brighter. Greg had organized a fair vote, paper ballots, community monitors, everything transparent. Several neighbors ran for board positions, ordinary folks with real jobs and families. No one with fake titles or overblown egos. When the results came in, it was almost poetic. Greg was elected president. Mrs. Jacobs became treasurer. And to everyone's surprise, they nominated me for property liaison, since my land bordered the community. At first, I laughed it off. You sure you want the guy who doesn't even live in the HOA? Greg grinned. That's exactly why we want you. You've got a level head, and you're not afraid to call out nonsense. So I accepted. After the meeting, I took a slow walk across the bridge again, reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. That little wooden bridge, once the center of all the chaos, had become a symbol of something bigger: boundaries, fairness, and the power of standing your ground even when the odds are stacked against you. I could almost hear Karen's voice echoing in my memory. You'll regret this, I'm warning you. But I smiled. Because now, regret was the last thing on anyone's mind. For once, the community wasn't divided by rules or fear. They were united, not by an HOA's authority, but by something Karen could never control: respect. And as the sun set over the neighborhood that evening, golden light dancing across the repaired bridge, I realized something. Sometimes the only way to rebuild peace is to let the noise fall apart first. Just when I thought the neighborhood had finally settled into peace, fate decided to slide one last surprise under my door. It was a Wednesday morning, quiet, calm, the kind of morning that smelled like new beginnings. Birds were chirping, the air was cool, and for once, I didn't have to think about HOA meetings or confrontation. Then I saw it, a thick, cream-colored envelope sitting on my welcome mat. No return address. Just my name typed neatly in the center, to Mr. Jacob Miles, concerning Willow Ridge property boundaries. My stomach sank a little. That kind of formality never meant good news. I set my coffee down, tore the envelope open, and unfolded the papers inside. The first line hit me like a hammer. This letter is to inform you that the original Willow Ridge property survey conducted in 1988 contains significant discrepancies regarding the eastern boundary line, specifically the parcel adjacent to your property and the bridge crossing Mill Creek. I blinked. Then read it again. Discrepancies? The eastern boundary line? That was my land. The bridge. I skimmed further, and that's when it got real interesting. Records indicate that the portion of land including Mill Creek Bridge and the surrounding 40 feet on both sides was never legally incorporated into the HOA subdivision plat. Ownership reverts to the holder of Lot 17, your property. I froze. Wait. Not only was my bridge outside their jurisdiction, I apparently owned the only access route that connected half the HOA neighborhood to the county road. That meant every single cement truck Karen had ordered across that bridge, every landscaper, every HOA project, they'd all been trespassing on my property. Later that day, I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk, a cheerful woman named Angela, helped me pull the original plats and amendments. After about 20 minutes of flipping through yellowed maps, she pointed to one with her pen. "See this dotted line," she said. "That's the creek. And here, this shaded section? It was never transferred to the HOA trust. It's legally part of your deed." I leaned in closer. "So you're saying, technically, they've been crossing private property every time they used that bridge?" Angela nodded. "Exactly. You own the only crossing to the east cul-de-sac. They must have assumed it was shared land, but the paperwork was never finalized." I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of that sink in. For years, Karen had acted like she ruled this entire community, sending me letters, demanding I follow her rules. But in the end, she'd been marching her little army straight across my land without permission. I took copies of every document, got them notarized, and sent a summary to the new HOA board. That evening, Greg called me personally. "Jacob," he said, his tone equal parts stunned and amused, "we just finished reviewing the county survey. You weren't kidding. That bridge and the road leading to it, they're yours." "Every inch," I confirmed. There was a pause, then a laugh. "You realize this means half the neighborhood technically has to use your property to reach the main road?" "Yeah," I said, smirking. "I realized that about 10 minutes ago." Greg sighed. "Well, that explains why Karen fought so hard over it. She must have known something. Maybe she thought if she bullied you enough, you'd cave and sign over an easement." I nodded slowly. "Wouldn't surprise me. She always seemed a little too obsessed with that bridge." "Don't worry," Greg continued. "We'll work this out legally, fairly this time. No strong-arming, no fake fines. Just a real agreement." By the next HOA meeting, word had already spread. Half the neighborhood turned up just to see the official confirmation. Greg stood at the podium with a survey map projected behind him. "As you can see," he said, pointing at the shaded area, "the bridge and its approach are private property belonging to Mr. Miles. This means any community access across that section must be granted by written easement." The murmurs started immediately. "Wait, so we've been using his land all along? You mean Karen lied about the HOA maintaining it? Oh, she's gonna lose her mind when she hears this." I raised my hand. "To be clear," I said with a half smile, "I have no intention of blocking anyone's access. But from now on, things are going to be properly documented. No more assumptions. No more trespassing." That got a round of applause, not just polite, but genuine. People were tired of being in the dark. "Mrs. Jacobs called out, "So technically, you're the landlord of half the HOA now?" I chuckled. "Let's just say I own the road you drive on." The room erupted in laughter. Even Greg couldn't hide his grin. After the meeting, a few neighbors approached me, looking relieved, even grateful. One man said, "It's funny. Karen spent years trying to control you. Turns out, you had the upper hand the whole time." I shrugged. Sometimes, the truth just takes a while to surface. That night, I walked down to the bridge again, the same spot that had once been a battlefield of egos and cement trucks. The water shimmered quietly beneath, carrying away the last traces of Karen's chaos. I ran my hand along the railing, thinking about everything that had happened, how one small piece of land had caused so much trouble. And now, it was my responsibility. Not as a wall to divide us, but as a bridge to remind us all what happens when power gets out of hand. The letter had changed everything. But it also gave me something unexpected: control through respect, not fear. And this time, the HOA couldn't do a thing about it. 2 months after the chaos, Willow Ridge didn't look like the same neighborhood anymore, and honestly, it didn't feel like it either. The air was lighter. The lawns greener. People smiled at each other again instead of side-eyeing over mailbox paint or fence height. It was almost hard to remember that not long ago, this peaceful place had been ruled by one woman with a clipboard, a bad temper, and a taste for control. And now the symbol of everything she fought over, my little bridge, had become the center of something completely different. The new beginning. One Saturday morning, Greg stopped by my place with a folded banner under his arm and that familiar half-grin on his face. "You got a minute?" he asked. "Always," I said, motioning him inside. He laid the banner across my kitchen table. In big blue letters, it read, "Community Barbecue, Bridge Reopening Celebration." I raised an eyebrow. "Bridge reopening?" Greg chuckled. "You didn't think we'd repair it without a party, did you? It's kind of become the town landmark now, might as well celebrate it properly." I laughed, shaking my head. "You sure people will show up?" He nodded. "They will. After what we all went through. This neighborhood needs a fresh start, and it starts here." Setting the stage that afternoon, half the community was down by the creek. Kids ran around with balloons, the smell of burgers filled the air, and someone even brought a live band. The once divisive bridge was now covered in ribbons and fairy lights, freshly sanded and sealed. I leaned against the railing, remembering all the nights I'd stood there alone, angry and exhausted after another confrontation with Karen's so-called rules. Now, it was alive with laughter. Mrs. Jacobs came over, holding a paper plate stacked with cookies. "You did good, Jacob," she said. "You didn't just fix that bridge, you fixed this neighborhood." I smiled. "I didn't do it alone." "Maybe not," she said softly, "but you were the first to stand your ground. The rest of us just needed to see it could be done." That stuck with me. Because it was true, sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to bow to unfair power for everyone else to find their own courage. The unexpected visitor. As the sun dipped low, turning the creek golden, a quiet hush spread through the crowd. A black SUV had pulled up near the clubhouse, county vehicle. Out stepped Detective Mason. The same man who'd put Karen in cuffs. He spotted me across the bridge and walked over, grinning. "Heard you're a bit of a local legend now." I laughed. "Legend's a strong word. I just didn't want my bridge destroyed." He smirked. "Well, your stubbornness paid off. Karen took a plea deal last week. 2 years probation, restitution, and banned from holding any HOA position again." I raised an eyebrow. "Banned from HOAs? That's poetic." Mason chuckled. "Yeah, the judge said something about keeping public menaces out of community leadership." I couldn't help but grin. "Sounds about right." He gave the bridge an approving nod. "Nice rebuild. You planning to keep it open to the neighborhood?" "Of course," I said. "But this time, everyone knows whose land they're walking on." "Good man," Mason said, patting my shoulder before heading back to his car. "Keep the peace, Sheriff." The moment of unity. As evening settled in, Greg took the mic near the edge of the bridge. "Folks," he said, his voice echoing over the creek, "a few months ago, this bridge was a symbol of division. Today, it's a symbol of what happens when a community stands together, with fairness, honesty, and a little help from a stubborn neighbor." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I tried not to roll my eyes as everyone looked my way. He continued, "So let's officially reopen this bridge, not as HOA property, not as private land, but as a connection between all of us." He held up a giant pair of scissors and cut the blue ribbon strung across the bridge. The crowd erupted in cheers. Kids ran across, holding sparklers. Neighbors clinked cups and laughed. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: pride. Real pride. Not the kind tied to ownership or boundaries, but the kind that comes from knowing you did something right, no matter how messy it got along the way. The final reflection. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone on the bridge. The fairy lights still glowed faintly in the dark, and the sound of the creek whispered beneath me. It hit me just how far things had come. Karen's control. The cement trucks. The traps. The investigation. All of it had led here, to this moment of quiet peace. I thought about the letter that changed everything, the people who finally stood up for themselves, and how justice had a funny way of showing up, slow, steady, but sure. I pulled out my phone and took one last photo of the bridge under the moonlight, not for proof, not for bragging rights, but as a reminder that sometimes, life will send a Karen barreling through your peace with a cement truck, but if you hold your ground, if you stay patient and fight smart, the bridge that nearly broke you might just end up being the one that brings everyone together. As I turned to leave, a faint sound drifted through the night, laughter from a nearby house, a dog barking, the wind rustling through the trees. Willow Ridge was finally calm. And as for Karen? Well, last I heard, she'd moved 2 towns over. Apparently, they have an HOA there too. But that's someone else's story to tell.